Hola, salut, namaste, ni hao. My name is Diana Sepulveda, and I am an international student at Monash University, currently doing a Master's in International Sustainable Tourism Management. As part of my course, I have taken some introductory classes on the subject of tourism and cultural tourism. I have a background in fine arts, which is why I find the subject of cultural tourism very thought-provoking. Some of my first lectures and readings were focused on trying to define what is culture, and more specifically, what is cultural tourism. And let me tell you something, if someone asked me to define what those two concepts are, I still wouldn't be able to provide a definite answer. But why is that? What defines culture? Who defines culture? In class, the definition of culture that most of my peers and I agreed on was the one defined by Bates and Plaut. A system of shared beliefs, values, costumes, behaviors, and artifacts that members of a society use to cope with their world and with one another, and that are transmitted from generation to generation through learning. And therefore, cultural tourism is focused on the consumption of the products that are derived from this culture. Nonetheless, my purpose on this blog is not to argue on the right or wrong definition of these terms, but to reflect on several issues that emerge from this matter. I wanted to use these definitions to establish a basic framework so that you could understand better the complexities behind tourism. Most of the aspects of cultural tourism that have struck me the most in the past couple of weeks since I started my master's degree have been the ones that have produced the most controversy and arguments among my peers and myself. As in my opinion, these are the ones that make tourism so complex, sparking my interest in doing further research and investigation. An example of this is a discussion that arose after we were asked by a professor, why do people travel? And in respect to cultural tourism, do people travel with the main purpose of seeing cultural attractions and interacting with other cultures? Immediately after this question was asked, the class was divided into two main groups. Those who thought culture was a big reason behind tourism motivations to travel, and those who thought tourism mostly seek only to relax and culture is just an incidental happening within their travels. So who's right? Who's wrong? There exists research on the typology of the tourist, like that of McArthur and Ducros 2015, that focus on the tourist's degree of involvement with culture. But rather than trying to solve this challenge by focusing on classifying my classmates and myself into each of these categories, I decided to use the best resource that I thought I could find: tourists. And I wanted to start with myself. I am originally from Mexico, but I've left my home at 17 mainly because of my need to travel and to see the world. I moved to Canada, I traveled through Europe and the United States until the moment I've decided to move here to Melbourne. One of the questions people always ask me is why Melbourne? And personally, due to my background in fine arts, I came here because of Melbourne's reputation as an arts hub. I have explored galleries, museums, theaters, even Melbourne's coffee and food culture. But am I in the majority? Or am I the exception? Throughout this video blog, I am going to explore 5 different cultural attractions in Melbourne and try to gain a better understanding of my in-class learning through real-life experiences that are happening right outside my door. My first stop is Melbourne Museum, so let's ask people what brought them here.
South Korea.
South Korea?
Yep. And I live in Albury, north of Melbourne, and I came to Melbourne for the first time.
I come from France. Well, I'm French, but I come from Sweden. I work in Sweden.
I'm originally from Brisbane.
I live in Sydney, but I'm originally from Brazil.
Place to see in Melbourne, and was on the top list.
Well, we came here in Australia for a conference. It was an international conference, and we are paleontologists, so we are interested in natural history and fossils. So we usually work in the collections, but today we have finished the conference, so we wanted to see the exhibition.
It's a beautiful museum. I've been here before. I saw the Tutankhamun exposition a few years ago, and I really like the museum.
I do, yes. It's a good way to find out the cultural backgrounds and stuff of the place I go.
Yeah, usually at least natural history museums. I think most of us used to go there and have a look at least in the exhibitions.
I do, yes. Every city I've gone to overseas, I've definitely made that a priority to go to the museums. I just find it's a really good starting point to sort of get a general overview of maybe what the city values or some sort of context about the city and maybe some historical information as well. So yeah, go to lots of museums.
Yes, we do every time that we come to Melbourne. So possibly we're going to the NGV this afternoon, and we really like it.
It's not about learning, but just see how people are based, like how they live. So I don't expect much of a learning thing out of the museum.
We're interested in it's usually looking at the species which are endemic species, so from Australia, for example, or like things you wouldn't be able to see. I'm coming from Europe, so things I wouldn't be able to see in Europe.
It depends how many I've seen that day, but I take a long time, probably longer than my friends would like, who I'm traveling with. My level of engagement, yeah, I'd probably like to do like the audio guide if there's one, like to ask questions. I usually take a while when I go through. Yeah.
Oh, always, yes, always. Yeah, always expect to learn something, see something different, something from different cultures, and I really love it, yeah.
As you can see, just as it's difficult to define culture, and just as my class had divided opinions on what makes tourists travel, tourists themselves are all different. It would seem almost impossible to try to classify them and make them fit into a specific definition. However, I think that only through the combination of both literary review and on-ground analysis, we can determine what makes each attraction in each city, in each different country attractive to not only visitors but the locals who seek culture in their own backyards. Thank you and see you.